Okay, so we are going to be talking today about the budget, setting the budget, filing the taxes, and a couple of new things that came up at leadership training. All right, so first for the budget, your budget is your unit's financial plan for the year. The budget shows your members your plan for how you will raise funds and spend them to implement the PTA mission and purposes. It is a guideline and working document for your annual plan of work. So by working document, that means that it can change. It's kind of a living document. It can change from time to time as the need arises. And we'll talk about, as we move forward, how you can make those changes. It's not as simple a process as, say, changing your standing rules or something, but it can be changed throughout the year if you find that you need to adjust your plan because you don't know how things are going to work, or how much money you're actually going to raise and what expenses sometimes pop up. Some key points to remember when you are planning your budget. All PTA activities, including fundraising, should be focused on the PTA mission and purpose. Remember, our PTA mission is to help ensure that all children meet their potential through advocacy and education. Transparency is key. Your membership should be able to look at your plan and your budget and understand where your funds are coming from and where they're going and how they're being spent. Because remember, we are custodians of the membership's funds. It's not our money. It's not the board's money. It's our membership's money. All funds generated by PTA should be budgeted for purposes that advance PTA work. So as you're choosing what to spend your money on, what kind of programs you're going to develop, you're always wanting to keep in the back of your mind what the mission and purpose is of PTA, and that you're making decisions about what to do that support that purpose and mission. Use the 3-to-1 rule. This will come up a lot in fundraising and programs. The general rule is for each fundraiser, you should have for each fundraiser you do, you should have 3 programs that are not fundraising. They typically don't cost money to the people participating, like a STEM night or a book fair is not a program. Book fair, you're making money. So 3 programs for each fundraiser. The proposed budget must be approved and adopted by your membership at a general meeting before anything is started, before you start new fundraising and spending the money. Okay, the budget committee. You should have a budget committee to work on the budget, develop the budget. The treasurer is the chair for the budget committee. Unless your PTA does it differently, the elected officers, your executive committee, will make up your budget committee. I tend to invite anyone from my board to be on the budget committee. I also ask for input from the various chairs on the budget. The committee may be appointed by the executive committee if it's not the executive committee doing it themselves, but you should usually have 3 to 5 members, and one of them has to be a treasurer. And you probably notice we always have odd numbers for these types of things: audit committee, budget committee, nominating committee. So if you end up having to vote on something, having to make a decision through vote, you can't have a tie. So we always try to have odd numbers for these types of things. solicit input from your committee chairs. Your reflections person might have some ideas about things she'd like to do to promote that program. So she might want to request a certain amount of funds. So I always send out an email before our budget committee meets and invite the chairs to let me know if they have any requests for their budgets. Now they might, we might not be able to meet all their requests, but at least we have their input and we can, explain to them why we could or couldn't give them what they requested. But it's a good starting point for planning. Use your previous budgets as a guideline. Your budget doesn't have to be the same from year to year. You can change up what you do for fundraising. You can change what programs you decide to do. But, previous year's budget kind of gives you a guideline on how money was spent, how much it costs to do things, and always keeping in mind that, as we move ahead due to inflation and stuff, things will cost more as we move ahead in the years. And then before you take your budget to your general membership for approval, you should present it to your board to review, especially if no one provided any input on their budget items. They might want to have a chance to look over and give some input at that time when you meet with your board. So you're not approving it with your board, you're just having anyone look over to see if there need to be any changes or updates or revisions, to make it work better for your purposes. Okay, so I'm gonna hang on one sec. Okay, we're looking good so far. All right, moving forward. Just checking the chat box. Okay, and as I said, the proposed budget must be approved by your general membership. I think we all know that by now. So when you have your first general meeting, and that's why we always try to schedule them kind of early in the year, like in August if possible, early September, because you really can't start spending funds or doing fundraising until that budget has been approved. So we always try to schedule the general meeting as early in the school year as we can manage, which this year it's a little crazy. So it might take a little while to get that organized. Okay, so developing a budget. If you haven't done a budget before and you're not familiar with the process, here are some things to keep in mind. Consider what your goals are for the year and the resources that you'll need to reach those goals. I'm at Hagerty. For those of you who don't know, I'm the president at Hagerty High School, PTSA, and we decided last year that we wanted to focus on mental health education and resources for our teens, because teens feel especially stressed these days, and we're continuing and building on that program this year. So that was one of our big goals for last year. So as we were planning our budget, we kept that into consideration of how we were going to do that and what it would cost to do some of the things we wanted to do. Look at the previous year's budget to see how well that budget fit the needs. Did we end up spending more here than we anticipated, or did we not really spend much in this area? So we can adjust, like this area might need a little more this year, this area not so much because they didn't spend very much. So you always kind of look to see how it played out. What were the actual amounts earned and spent, and make those adjustments for this year. Fundraising, we already kind of talked about the 3-to-1 rule. So keep in mind, we all get excited about different ideas of how we can make money, how we can get funds to do the programs that we'd like to do, but we need to be careful that we're not doing more fundraising than we're supporting with programs. We are a charitable class in the IRS. We cannot do fundraisers that benefit individuals in need. I know this tends to come up each year, not necessarily in every unit, but one unit you have a teacher maybe who gets really sick or has an accident or a family, and you cannot fundraise specifically. That PTA cannot fundraise specifically for an individual like that. We're a charitable class for our group. Our group is our membership. So the fundraising that we do needs to be to benefit our whole membership, not an individual. And we can talk a little bit more about that in the end if you want, ways that PTA could help outside of fundraising. Your budget should cover the financial year, which for us, we go from July 1st through June 30th is our financial year. It's going to cover what you expect to earn for revenue and what you expect to spend for income, with leaving some room for some carryover, because as we know, we typically have summer expenses that we have to do before we can approve our new budget. So we try to plan some carryover that will help cover those expenses. Which that's this point. Be sure you include an interim or summer budget for that period between July 1st and your first general meeting. So you can do that welcome back breakfast or lunch for the teachers, or you can get spirit wear to sell at your scheduled pickup and meet the teacher. But that needs to be included in your budget. All right, so I feel like I skipped something here. Hang on one sec. Nope. All right, so you basically have two sections to your budget. You have the income section. So the income section represents what you anticipate doing to raise money, your ways, how you're going to get your means. So this is, you'll see this later today. This is our proposed budget that we're going to be proposing at our general meeting today for you guys to approve. So the top, the blue part, that's our carryover. We split ours into different accounts because we have some designated funds that go to specific purposes. So we can only use them for those purposes. So our total carryover is at the top, and then right below it are the three accounts that we split it into and the breakdown there. And then you can see in the gray and white area, those are the anticipated fundraising that we plan to do. And then our designated funds, what we expect to do there. Now this one, I hadn't updated this before we got the word. We did not get that national PTA grant, so that has come out. All right, so your income section should be specific. You need to list each resource that you think you're going to get. Your membership dues, your whatever fundraisers we're doing a fun run, we're doing a book fair, we're doing, each one should have their own line item so you can track where the income came from throughout the year. I give a couple sample items because yours will look a little different than ours because we do things differently, because our purpose is a little different. Our purpose is mostly to support you guys, our local units. And one of those ways we do it is through training and other things. So yours might look more like you definitely have a line for your membership dues. You might have a donations line, box tops, grants, if you're applying for grants. As I said, if you're doing like a fun run or a book fair, each one of those should have their own line in your income section. And then the total at the bottom here is the total amount of income we expect to raise. That's not including our carryover. I leave the carryover out because I want to at least have that same amount for next summer. If this carryover is what we need to do our summer business, I want to kind of maintain that from year to year. So I kind of try to plan without that. So the second part is the expense section, and that typically is a little longer and bigger than our income section, because remember the 3-to-1 rule. So 3 programs to each fundraiser. So again, the gray and white part are our typical expenses that we incur throughout the year. We have an administrative line item that's always good to have something, for those costs like buying name tags for everybody, postage when you have to send things out, printer cartridges for your poor treasurer having to print out treasurer reports all the time. Then at the bottom, we have our designated funds, the ones that are going to specific purposes. So the money that we raise for Prevention Coalition, we can only use for our Prevention Coalition grants. And then at the very bottom, the darker blue is our interim, our summer expenses. All right, so you should have a line item for each of your programs or projects that you're planning. So if you're doing like a STEM night or STEAM night, you might have a specific line item for that. I also recommend kind of having a couple of more general line items that give you a little flexibility. Like you might just want to have a programs line item. So that's not a specific program, but it gives you a little flexibility. So if something comes up like this really cool author is available to come talk about a book series that your kids are really excited about, but you didn't think about that at the beginning of the year, and that could fit under that more general line item of programs. So have specific line items for things that you're definitely going to do and you're definitely going to spend money on, but leave a couple of more broad ranged line items to give you a little flexibility so you don't have to go back to your general membership every time to make adjustments. It gives you, a little flexibility to fit things in that you might not have thought out at the beginning of the year. So I listed a couple of items that might be in your expense area. You should have a line item for your national state dues that you have to pay out. We don't have that because we don't pay those dues. We don't do individual memberships. And your expenses should not exceed your income. That should be common sense. You shouldn't spend more than you make, or you're really in trouble at the end of the year. And that's one of the main things that your treasurer should be monitoring throughout the year, that you're staying within your budget, that you're staying within the plan, so that you don't find yourself in trouble at the end of the year without the funds to do what you had planned to do. So if you can see our total expenses down here, we have at 30,805, and let me go back. Our income was 31,580. So we're just a little higher on our income, but remember, that's not including our carryover. So if we stay within that budget, we should have a carryover of closer to 5,700 for the summer expenses. Okay. I'm going to pop over here for a minute, see if there are any questions. Okay, just said we have a few extra minutes if we need it. Okay, so, oops. So using your budget, the treasurer, as I just mentioned, is responsible for tracking the actual income and expenses. So most treasurers will kind of provide that monthly at your monthly reports, a budget to actual, where you can see what was budgeted and compare it with what has actually been spent and earned. And that's always good. I know, especially chairs like that information, so they know where they are within their budget. So they know if they have more to spend, or they need to kind of slow down. So the treasurer's keeping track of that, and you should be able to go to your treasurer and ask them, not off the top of their head, where are we in our budget, but they should be able to go back and within a couple days be able to tell you that. As a side note, for chairs, they should be kind of keeping track of their income and expenses too on their own. That's not going to be the official record, but they should be responsible for keeping track of what they're spending or earning too, as kind of a backup for the treasurer, so that they're not having to constantly come to you to ask, how am I in my budget? Amending the budget. So you can, as we talked about, this is a living document. This is something that can change when it needs to be changed. So anytime you see a need to make a change, you can do that. And I know a lot of people will be like, well, can we shift funds from this line item to this line item? Well, you can, but you have to get that approved by your general membership. So you can't just sit at a board meeting and say, well, the reflections chair says, well, I have plenty of money left if the STEAM people want more money for their program. You can't just do that way. You can talk about and discuss it and decide that's a change you want to make, but then you have to take that change to your membership to vote on. If you're going along and you're not seeing any need for changes, you should always at mid-year kind of review where you are in your budget to determine if you need to make any changes. And that's typically why we have that mid-year general meeting in January or February, is to approve any budget changes and to elect your nominating committee. But you should always at least review it mid-year to see if you're on track or if you need to make some adjustments. Like maybe a fundraiser didn't happen and it didn't make as much money as we anticipated. Or even better, it made a lot more money than we anticipated, so we feel like we can add some expenses for some other things. So it's always good to review at least halfway through the year. We talked a little bit about restricted funds. I keep calling them designated funds. One that tends to come up, especially with elementary schools, is like the school might ask you if you can raise money for a new playground. Or I think one of the units I talked to, their school wants them to do a sunshade for their playground. You really need to be careful and give a lot of consideration to that before you decide to take something like that on. Because first of all, if you advertise that this is what the money is going to be spent for, then that is what you have to spend the money for. So if you put out there, we want a new playground, we're running these fundraisers to make money for this playground, then that money has to be spent for that playground. So if you do all the fundraising and it comes down, you don't have enough money to do the playground, you can't say, well, sorry, we're not able to do that, so we're going to use that money for that. No, you can't do that. That money would have to be returned to everybody who donated to that purpose, unless they had a written agreement that, okay, you can keep our donation to use for another purpose. The other thing you want to be careful about with these types of things, like for example, the sunshade, when you as a PTA fundraise and you donate that to the school, you need to make very clear that once it's donated to the school, it becomes their responsibility for maintenance and upkeep, or else they can be coming back to you asking for funds from year to year to help with that. So unless you want to incur that responsibility, that's another thing you need to be thinking about and considering before you decide if you want to do some kind of project like that. So there's a lot to think about. So if your PTA is considering that, you might want to reach out to us to give you some thinking points and talking points before you decide to commit to that. Okay, and then the carryover. There is no rule on how much you can carry over from year to year. We typically, our goal is to spend what we make each year, so that your carryover is about the same from year to year. And the carryover is really more to help make sure we have those summer funds. I know a lot of elementary schools especially, and some of the middle schools, had money left over, probably a little more carryover than usual, because they weren't able to do their 5th grade celebrations or their 8th grade celebrations. And that's fine. Everybody understands that situation, but kind of keep that in consideration. That's just, you'll have a little extra money to spend this year. You should not be writing checks at the end of the year to the school, the principal, for things that were not already in the budget, to get rid of these extra funds. They can't come to you at the last minute and say, oh, we think it'd be really nice to put a flagpole in the middle of the commons area. Oh my gosh, we got to get moving here. I'm talking too much. They did give us a little extra time. That was my alarm for 5-minute warning. So anyway, no, you can't write a big check at the end of the year to the school. I got to move faster. All right, IRS, filing a 990, because that's this time of year too. All right, so the purpose of the 990, it's more informational because we don't have to pay income tax. So it's to kind of provide information to the IRS about our fundraising, our revenue and income. The public and donors can look at our 990 returns to kind of see where we are, if we're, making and doing what we said we were going to do. And it's also our members. Our members can look into that to see, did we make the funds we reported, and did we spend them the way we had planned to? Others who might want to investigate these forms, potential donors, they might want to look at, what's this organization about? What are they doing? What kind of funding do they typically have? Researchers, the media, if they're doing a story about PTAs, they might want to look into, what kind of money are they making? Or anyone who might have a beef with PTA, they might want to look at, are we making too much? Are we not spending the money the way we should? Whoops, I think I skipped one. All right, so this is the breakdown of how you have to file. If your 3-year average of income is less than $50,000, then you just need to do the e-postcard, which is real simple. You just log in, check a couple boxes, and you're done. If your 3-year average is 50,000, more than 50,000 and less than 200, then you have to do the 990 EZ. So that's a little longer form, a little more detailed. If you're making more than 200,000, then you got the big form to have to do. And a lot of us will hire an accountant to do the forms, because they're kind of, I don't know, you do your own income taxes, they're crazy. What they mean by normal gross receipts is you have to look at your 3-year average. So just because I know a lot of us, we were very low on our income this year, so we're like, oh yay, we can do the postcard this year. Well, not exactly. We have to go back and look at our 3 years in average to see what our average income is, because they want to know, what do we normally bring in? So yeah, we had a crazy year this year and we didn't make as much as we normally do. But if we're normally making over 50,000, then we still really need to file that way. So there's an example there of, you can see the income for over 3 years varies, but when they average it, it averages just over 50,000. So they need to file that way. So gross receipts, that's the total amount that you brought in. That doesn't, you don't take out for any expenses. It's not your net, it's your gross, but you do take out the dues that you send to state and national, because they report that. Florida PTA and National PTA report that $350 that you're sending to them. So when you're figuring your gross receipts, and it's right on our annual audit form, they have you subtract out what you sent to state and national. So that gross amount is what you're going to use to report for your 990. Unrelated business income. If you are making more than $1,000 unrelated business income, then you might have to pay taxes on that. What it is an activity that's unrelated to your business if it meets these 3 requirements. The activity constitutes a trade or business which I know a lot of us do school stores, but if the school stores are being run by volunteers, that doesn't count. That's exempt. Trade or business is regularly carried on, and it is not substantially related to the exercise or performance of our purpose. So the one that tends to get us in trouble are the spirit nights. If you're not doing at least 80% of the work for a spirit night, then you need to be careful. If you're making over $1,000 in a year on your spirit nights, but your volunteers aren't putting the work into it, that could be considered unrelated business income. If the restaurant or whatever, or the skate night people, if they're doing more of the work, then that's essentially you have employees. So if it's our fundraisers don't count because typically we only do them once per year, so that would not be UBI. If we're doing most of the work for whatever the fundraiser, example, the school store, then it doesn't count as UBI. Okay, and we talked about the school store exemption. All right, so real quick, before they come for us, a couple things that came up at Florida leadership training. They did change our bylaws so that we can currently hold electronic general meetings. So Zoom, WebEx, whatever you're using, except right now they're still saying we have to have one general meeting in person. So I think everybody is kind of planning on putting those off till later in the year to kind of see how things go. GoFundMe. You can set up a GoFundMe account for something if that is approved by your general membership, included in the budget, and it's for a specific cause or item. Like, we're saying if we're trying to raise money for a playground, or we want to help get new computers in the computer lab, you can set something like that up. Gift cards. This is the big one, because we have been told for many years that we cannot purchase gift cards with PTA funds. So they went back and they talked to some more lawyers and talked to some accountants, and they have changed the policy on gift cards. We now may purchase gift cards with our PTSA funds with some guidelines. So one is an individual is eligible to receive only 2 gift cards per fiscal year with a max value of $25 for each gift card. So when you are purchasing any gift cards, you cannot purchase them for more than $25. The value has to be $25 or less. Gift cards are considered the same as cash and need to be secured the same as cash. So however, if you have money for a cash box, or however you keep your cash safe and secure, the same needs to be done with your gift cards. You need to log and have a clear process for how they're purchased, for what purpose they're purchased, and how they're dispersed. That's just, that's another task for your treasurer. So here's a sample gift log. I created this based on what Florida PTA recommended be included in the gift log. So it has date of purchase or donation. So even if you have gift cards or gift certificates donated to you, those should also be logged and tracked. Where it came from, the number on it, the value, who you eventually give it to, when it was distributed, who gave it to them, what was the purpose, and the budget line. So I can send this to you at some point, or as I say, this is being recorded. You can get that if you want to kind of set up yours similar to that. All right, so resources, if you have more questions or need some more help, you should have received the kit of materials. They sent that out, I believe, last week to all the presidents, treasurers, and secretaries. You have my email. It's treasurer@sccpta.com. And we have a new Florida treasurer this year. And you can reach her at treasurer@floridapta.org. But please please check your kit of materials first should be your first thing. Look in your dollars and cents because that can answer almost all your questions. Your next step would be me before you go to the Florida PTA treasurer, and I will try to help you answer any questions that you have.